Hi, I'm Ed Waldrop, Master Tech at iCracked.com, the world's largest mobile on-demand smartphone repair service. In this video, we're going to take you through the repair of an iPhone 7. We'll talk through the entire process, but if you're watching this video and find yourself with a broken smartphone, visit iCracked.com and we'll schedule with a local iTech to fix your device today. Or if you happen to be a tinkerer like myself, you can always purchase a do-it-yourself repair kit from our website. So let's get into it. As you can see, I'm using proper anti-static safety with a mat and a wristband grounded to earth. So to open the iPhone 7, we're going to have to apply some heat to the screen to loosen the gasket that sits between the frame and the glass. We'll also use a couple of tools, such as a suction cup, a guitar pick, or a pry tool. So the first thing we're going to want to do is remove the two screws at the bottom left and right of the charge port using the pentalobe screwdriver. If you have the black phone, you want to be careful that your tools don't slip because you could potentially scratch your frame. Now that I've got the two pentalobe screws removed, I'm going to use a heat source such as a hot air gun or a hair dryer. The idea here is to get the screen hot enough so that the adhesive that lays between the frame and the display loosens up and allows you to easily lift the display. So using your heat source, you want to constantly move it around and evenly heat this, while not getting it too hot and not getting too close because you could burn the phone. So as I'm moving around, I'm also going to be touching the screen to make sure it's warm enough, but not too hot that I'm going to burn myself. If it is too hot to where I may burn myself, I'm going to let it cool down for a few seconds to where I can touch it. Now that I've provided sufficient heat, I'll go ahead and take my suction cup, place it on the glass just above the home button. Now if your display is badly fractured, you may have to put a couple of layers of tape on here so that you can get a grip on the suction cup. By pulling the ring on the suction cup and placing my fingers on the outside of the frame, I'm going to slowly start lifting just enough so that I can create a gap in here in which to insert my guitar pick or the nylon pry tool. Now once I get this in here, I can go around and very gently start cutting the adhesive in here. So you see you could use both tools. Now I'm coming up the sides here and breaking that adhesive. Then I'm going to come around the other side and break the adhesive too. But you don't want to go in too far on this side because your cables are located right here. And if you come in with the guitar pick and you shove it in really far, you could end up damaging those cables. So I'm going to continue with my pry tool since it only allows me to go in that far. This whole time I'm keeping a grip on the suction cup to keep it lifted. Now the top end of the phone is actually slid into the frame, so you can't really get underneath there. But once the sides are pretty well released, then you could take the phone and slowly work it downward to break the adhesive gasket along the top edge. There we go. So now I've broken that top edge, and that will allow me to open the display sort of like a book. But the key is that you want to make sure that the display sits along the edge of the frame here, because that gives you enough room to keep this open and be able to use your hands to start removing the screws. Now the flex cable and battery retaining plate located here is held in with tri-wing screws. Now what we found is that some open really nice with a double zero and some open really nice with a triple zero. So you're going to have to try both of them to see which one's going to actually grab the screw. If you use the triple zero and you feel like it's jumping around, switch to the double zero, otherwise you're going to strip the head. So there's 4 screws in this retaining plate. The 3 on the inside are the equal length, and the one closest to the outside is the long one. It's always best to put a fresh charge of magnetism on your tools so that you can easily grab the screws. I'm going to grab the retaining plate and go ahead and remove it. Using a nylon spudger or an ESD safe pry tool, we're going to disconnect the battery. Now the safest place to go to the battery is between the shield plate here and the standoff screw. If you come in here, get underneath, you can pop it right up and fold it out of your way so your battery is disconnected. Next, I'm going to come down at the lower edge closest to the loudspeaker and disconnect the LCD and digitizer flex cable, and then the home button and force touch flex cable. Once those are free, I can slide the screen down a little to give me access to the camera flex cable retaining plate. Now this is held in with 2 Phillips screws, so go ahead and remove those. Grab the retaining plate and set it aside. Then I could come in here and you've got the front facing camera right here below the rear facing camera where it connects to the logic board. And then come in here and disconnect it from the logic board. Now the 2 are separated. While this is open, go ahead and take a plastic pry tool on the inside of the frame here and pick off any remaining adhesive that might be left over. Just be careful that you don't slip and puncture the battery. You're going to go all the way around, make sure all the old adhesive is removed. And then set the frame aside. Now there's quite a few components that have to be transferred from the original display assembly to the new display assembly. Now I'll go ahead and start up here at the ear speaker retaining bracket. It's held in with 3 Phillips screws. And go ahead and lift the retaining bracket out. There we go. Now you've got the front-facing camera, which I'll just move away. And then there's 2 Phillips screws holding the ear speaker to the bezel. So I'll go ahead and remove those 2 Phillips screws. Then remove the ear speaker itself. Located at the top, you've got the ambient light sensor and the proximity sensor. This cable comes around and then loops and plugs in. So we're going to have to come up under here and pull this out of the brackets. But one of the things you want to make sure is that the proximity sensor is held in with a little bit of double-sided adhesive. So you want to heat the front side of the screen right here to make it easier. So I'm going to come up under and pop the ambient light sensor out and then around and get the proximity sensor out. Here we go. So I'm going to take this cable and very gently rotate it around so that you can see here. And you've got the microphone and then the ear speaker contacts. Now the microphone is held in with a double-sided adhesive, and then the contacts for the ear speaker also held to the bezel with double-sided adhesive. Now there's two ways of actually getting this out. One way would be to remove the screw and bring the whole bracket up, but that takes a risk of ripping the contacts down here next to the bezel, so I wouldn't recommend that. What I would do is take my iFlex and come up underneath the microphone. So I'm going to slip it between the bezel edge here, right along here, and the flex cable at a 90-degree angle. And then just sort of lift down so that it gets underneath the microphone and breaks that adhesive free. Just like that. So now we have the contacts for the ear speaker down here. And the same thing, but I'm going to come down against the top of the LCD. Get up under here. You don't want to be fast or abrasive with this because you could cut the cable, and that's something you don't want to do because that would cost you additional parts. Now sometimes it stays pretty well, like on this one, it doesn't really want to lift up. So I'm very slowly walking it around the edge and working that adhesive. So I can get up underneath and then remove the entire cable out as a single piece. Next, we'll remove the 4 screws on the home button plate here at the bottom, which is again tri-wings. Go ahead and reach in and remove the retaining plate. Now the home button itself comes along here, around, and then over the top and connects to a cable down on the bottom. So this cable is not adhesive or anything down at the bottom, so it's very easy to damage. So one thing you're going to want to do here is use 2 spudgers or a spudger and a pry tool. And you're going to come in and hold the cable down at the bottom while coming along the edge and releasing the home button from the flex cable. You'll see here that this cable here is actually in the middle, and you can kind of roll it up to get it out of your way to see what you're working with. Now we have to break the adhesive free on the underside of the home button flex cable over here without damaging this section here or the physical home button. So again, you're going to heat up this area pretty good because there's quite a bit of adhesive and it's pretty strong. Once you've heated that up, you're going to come in and get an iFlex underneath. The iSesmo is a little wide, so it's pretty difficult. And you don't want to use a wide razor blade because if you slip, you could slice right through the cable. So you're going to very gently come up underneath here and get all the way under there. And then come around the edge on the side and do the same thing. But you also have this alignment pin down here, so it kind of makes it difficult. but once you try it once or twice, you'll figure out a good process for doing that. And again, heating is the key. You don't want to grab this cable and just pull it up because you'll most likely sever this. So you got to be really gentle here. I've got it lifted up enough. I'm going to get my spudger underneath and very gently roll it underneath to lift it up. Then the home button itself will come out through the front and drop down. Now, the thermal plate, one thing to be aware of is there's 6 tri-wings, 3 on each side, and then there's a lot of adhesive on this area of the flex cable. And if you take this and just try to lift it up, you're going to break these tabs down off of the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the 6 tri-wings, which are all equal size. Now this phone's been opened a couple of times, and what you'll find that these screws can be difficult to break free. So what I'll do is I'll take my nylon spudger on the back side and then my screwdriver in the front so that I can get in there enough to break those free. Because if you just try pushing, you'll end up bending the tab. Once those are removed, you'll be able to lift the thermal plate up enough. But remember, you don't want to lift straight up like this because you'll end up damaging or breaking these tabs. So you've got to kind of open it up enough to come in here and loosen the adhesive. So come around the flex cable side and take my iFlex and come in, making sure I go over the top of these flex cables. You may have to give this a blast of hot air, but I'm going to very gently separate the adhesive from the cables itself. You notice I'm not prying or sliding, I'm just putting this in here, lifting the thermal plate up a little, and you can feel the adhesive letting go. There we go. As you can see, the areas of the adhesive is here, which is this, and then along the bottom, which is here. So once that's off, you're ready for the new display assembly. Now that the thermal plate is off, if you're working with a black display, you've got the ambient light filter here that may or may not have to be transferred over depending on our availability to get those pre-installed. So if this is not pre-installed, you will have to dig it out and transfer it over to the new display. Come along, make sure everything else is out. Now this screw here, which is the grounding around the ear speaker, will also have to be removed and transferred over to the new display. So now I've verified everything is removed. I'm going to go ahead and grab my new display. The first thing I'm going to do is take that last Phillips screw and insert it into the area here for the ear speaker ground. Now this display, this display has the ambient light sensor filter pre-installed and the adhesive backing for the microphone. So we're going to take the thermal plate, we're going to fold the cables down gently with our fingers and bring this in. Now I don't want this to stick yet, So I'm kind of holding it up because if the cables aren't flat and they stick in the wrong area, they're not going to sit correctly. So what I'm going to do is take the tri-wing screws from the side, and I'm going to put the one up here on the cable side at the very top. Get the thread started. I'm going to take one more. I'm going to go in the center of the opposite side. This way I know the plate is aligned. Then I can take the cables, hold them down nice and flat, and then take the thermal plate and smooth in so that the adhesive grips the new cables. And then insert the remaining 4 tri-wing screws. Now that the thermal plate is reinstalled with the 6 tri-wing screws, let's go ahead and make sure it's nice and smooth at the bottom and the cables are sitting in alignment. Next, we're going to take the home button with flex cable. We're going to pass it up through the home button hole and press it in with our fingers, and it should pretty much stay there. Now, the challenging part here is you have this cable here coming out from the backlight that your home button flex cable wants to sit on top of. So you're going to have to very gently roll this up, bring the cable underneath, and then drop the cable down onto the alignment pin of the bezel located right there. Go ahead and push this cable down, and then come over and reconnect the home button to the home button extension cable, and you should feel a nice click on there indicating that it's in place. Now I'll take the home button cable and a home button retaining plate and set it over here, and make sure that the tabs for your thermal plate go underneath this bracket. Now the first one I'm going to put in is the one holding the home button in place, because I don't want that to accidentally drop out on me and tear the cable. Now the retaining plate on this side has a plastic alignment pin, so make sure that the plate is dropped over the pin for alignment. So the home button retaining plate has an alignment pin down here that's built into the bezel. Make sure it drops over that before fully tightening the screw holding the home button in place. Then you can insert and tighten the remaining 3 screws. Now before tightening this one here, make sure that the flex cables fall within this rectangular area here before tightening it, so you don't accidentally crimp or damage the connectors. There we go. Next, I'm going to take the front-facing camera cable, which houses the ear speaker contacts, the top microphone, the ambient light sensor, proximity sensor, and the front-facing camera. I'm going to go ahead and remove the adhesive backing here for the upper microphone. And then if you look at the very bottom of this cable for the ear speaker contacts, you're going to see 2 holes. You have the 2 pins located down here at the bottom that the ear speaker contact holes will drop onto. So I'm going to go ahead and put those over there first. Make sure I'm down. Then I'm going to take my spudger, make sure this is nice and flat. So I'm going to set the top microphone down onto the adhesive. This cable here has the proximity sensor and the ambient light sensor. And you notice it's kind of rolled backwards. I rolled that out so that you could easily see what I was doing. So I'm going to roll this back around. I'm going to verify that the proximity sensor is in place and that the rubber boot for the ambient light sensor is in place. And then I'm going to drop the proximity sensor down into the proximity sensor bracket. You feel it drop in, and then lay the cable down, and you should feel the ambient light sensor rubber boot squeeze into the housing. Then I'm going to put my finger here to make sure this is all nice and flush across. If I feel any raised areas, that means they're not sitting in the brackets. This cable should come over nicely and fold around the upper microphone. I'm going to take my ear speaker. You notice the 4 springs at the bottom. Those go on the 4 copper holes down at the bottom of the cable. I'm going to go ahead and set this in place and hold it with my finger, and I should feel it drop down and pretty much stay in place. I'm going to take the 2 Phillips screws and reinsert them through the ear speaker to hold on to the contacts. Now I'm not fully tightening these yet because I want to make sure they're evenly tightened across when both screws are in place. So they're down, give them a little nudge, and you just go until they stop. Don't tweak or torque these, just until the screws stop. Then I could fold the camera over the speaker and make sure it drops into the ear speaker bracket. Take the retaining plate, lay it in place, and then reinsert and tighten the 3 screws. Now the ear speaker itself has a really strong magnet, so you may want to get your tweezers to assist you, otherwise your screw will jump all over the place because it wants to jump to the top of the ear speaker itself. And again, I'm only tightening these till they stop. I'm not over torquing them. Okay, now that your display assembly is fully assembled, we now have to place the gasket back onto the frame. Now the gasket comes like this. It's got 2 sheets. The outer sheet you'll be removing. Now there's 2 ways we can do this. We can take this, making sure this cutout and this cutout here comes over the rear camera, and this antenna, line it up so that all the corners sit in, and then flatten it. Now, available soon will be this gasket alignment tool. That I could set on here. And I'm only showing this because we have it. And this will accurately put the gasket back into the frame, and this will work on a 6S and a 7. Now for this though, you have to reconnect the battery so that it's out of the way for applying this. This little area here again is the rear facing camera. So I'll take this, line it up on these guides, set it in place, press it down, and then lift this back up. And now my gasket is inside. I'm going to go around and give it one final smooth to make sure that the gasket sits on the edges. And I could take and peel this top layer off. Okay. Now that leaves me one more layer inside. So the change they made between the 6S and the 7. Now I could take this one and pull it off. Now my gasket is completely within the frame. So you'll see on the front facing camera there's this hard area right here, a little clear plastic. That's where the natural fold should happen so that when it's inside the phone it would rest like this. So you want to make sure that's folded over. Next I'm going to take the frame and then I'm going to take the cable so it's sort of a little leaped forward like this. So that I can reconnect the front facing camera cable to the logic board connector. Now it wants to spring back, so make sure it's in place. And you should feel that nice click of it sitting in. Take the retaining bracket. Now if you notice on the retaining bracket, you're going to see this edge here with this little piece of black. That is going to go against the edge of the rear facing camera. Like so. Now we'll reinsert and tighten the two Phillips screws. Then I could take the display, move it up a little, and roll it around. So once again, make sure the display is resting on top of the frame so that you can get reach here and not worry about accidentally ripping the front-facing camera cable. I'm going to take the home button cable and reconnect it to the logic board. And you'll feel it double snap. Take the LCD digitizer cable, reconnect it to the logic board. And you should feel it snap on each end. One thing I want to stress, anytime you connect or disconnect the LCD digitizer flex cable, you must have the battery disconnected. Even though the phone may be off, if the battery's disconnected, there is still voltage within this area. And if your pins aren't lined up, you take the chance of blowing the backlight filters and rendering the phone irreparable. So now that those are nice and connected, I'll go ahead and reconnect the battery to the logic board. Now we'll take the retaining plate, set it in place, and insert and tighten the 4 tri-wing screws. Now that the 4 screws are in, I'm going to go ahead and tighten them. And remember, do not over torque these screws. They sit in close proximity to the logic board, and if you over tighten them, you will damage the logic board. Now, the next thing I want to do is turn on and test the phone to make sure I have LCD in touch and the front cameras and areas that are all working before I insert this, because of the adhesive around the edge. You don't want to insert this, find out something's not working, and then have to pull it apart and ruin your gasket. So I'm going to hold the frame and the screen slightly off like this. Grab an icon and make sure it moves all the way around. I'm going to use force touch by pressing hard on a force touch enabled icon, and you should feel the phone vibrate and get the pop-up. I'm going to check my cameras. Okay, the rear is good and the front is good. I want to test my microphone. Testing 1 2 3 3 2 1. Testing 1 2 3 3 2 1. Okay, so my ear speaker and loudspeaker works, because you remember the ear speaker is also your second loudspeaker. So I'm going to go ahead and power down the phone and complete the assembly. Okay, now if you look at the top of the display on the bezel, you're going to see 2 tabs. Those tabs slide underneath the frame here and grab it. So you need to do this without damaging the gasket. So you need to come in, slide it, move it forward till it hits the edge, keep pressure on it, come down, press the bottom in, and then walk up the edges. Then give a good peek. Make sure your bezel's popped into the frame completely. All right, we're good. I'm going to go ahead and power this on. Get my pentalobe screws and reinsert and tighten them. And be careful too when you're inserting the pentalobe screws, because if you slip off there, your tool could scratch the black finish on these, which is not as noticeable on the silver and gold, but very noticeable on the black. So no matter what phone, you really should be cognizant of tool slippage. This concludes the iPhone 7 display assembly replacement guide. Thanks for watching this video. Remember to visit iCracked.com for all your mobile device repair needs.